Καλησπέρα σας. Καλώς ήλθατε στο Πανεπιστήμιο Κύπρου. Επειδή η τελετή της καθηγήτριας Terrie E Moffitt, σε επίτιμη διδάκτορα της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου αρχίζει, παρακαλώ πως μείνετε στις θέσεις σας μέχρι το τέλος της τελετής. Ο πρίτανης του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου, καθηγητής Τάσος Χριστοφίδης, ως ο τελετάρχης του σημερινού γεγονότος, θα κηρύξει την έναρξη και τη λήξη της εκδήλωσης. Ο κοσμήτορας της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής, καθηγητής Αντώνης Έλληνας, θα αναγνώσει το ψήφισμα και ο καθηγητής του Τμήματος Ψυχολογίας Κώστας Φάντης θα παρουσιάσει το έργο και την προσωπικότητα της τιμόμενης. Στην πομπή συμμετέχουν ακαδημαϊκοί της σχολής από όλες ανεξαιρέτως τις βαθμίδες. Να αναφέρω τέλος ότι η τελετή μεταδίδεται ζωντανά από το κανάλι του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου στο YouTube. Μετά το πέρας της εκδήλωσής μας θα προσφερθεί δεξίωση για όλους και όλες. Ευχαριστούμε για τη συμμετοχή σας. Μας τιμά ιδιαίτερα. Τελετή αρχίζει.
Κηρύσω την έναρξη της ειδικής δημόσιας συνεδρίας της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής με προεδρεύοντα τον πρίτανη του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου και με μοναδικό θέμα της ημερήσιας διάταξης την αναγόρευση της καθηγήτριας Terrie E Moffitt σε επίτιμη διδάκτορα της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής. Καλώ στο βήμα τον καθηγητή του Τμήματος Ψυχολογίας του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου, Κώστα Φάντη, για να παρουσιάσει το έργο και την προσωπικότητα της τιμωμένης.
Good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Terrie E Moffitt, known as Tammy to your friends. Professor Moffitt is an honorary of Keihan University Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience at Duke University. She also holds an appointment at King's College London, has received honorary doctorates from KU Leuven and University of Basel, and serves as the director of the world-renowned Dunedin Multidisciplinary Health and Development Study. Professor Moffitt is internationally recognized for her pioneering contributions to developmental psychology, neuropsychology, and the study of genetic and environmental influences on mental health and criminal behavior. It is difficult to overstate the impact of her work on developmental psychology, clinical psychology, psychiatry, criminology, and behavioral genetics. Her research has fundamentally shaped how we understand antisocial behavior and mental health across the life course. She has an age index of over 230 and nearly 280,000 citations, making her one of the most influential and most cited psychologists in the world today. The list of honors and distinctions she has received is far too long to present in full this evening, but let me highlight just a few. Professor Moffitt is a fellow of the National Academy of Medicine and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. And she was appointed a member of the Order of the British Empire for her extraordinary contributions to science. She received several awards, including the APA Scientific Contributions Award, John P. Hill Memorial Award, and Klaus J. Jacobs Research Prize. I have known Professor Moffitt's work since I began my undergraduate studies. In fact, the first empirical paper I ever read was her landmark 1993 article introducing the developmental taxonomy, distinguishing adolescents limited from life course persistent antisocial behavior. Since then, I have spent much of my own academic career studying this very phenomena, Professor Moffitt, thank you for the inspiration. It is therefore both a tremendous personal honor and a great privilege for the University of Cyprus to welcome Professor Moffitt into its distinguished community of honorary doctorate recipients. Her work has transformed our understanding of human development and contributed profoundly to the progress of science. Please join me in welcoming Professor Terrie Moffitt, who will present her current work titled Measuring a Human Space of Aging, an Opportunity for Prevention. Thank you.
Καλότερα στο βήμα τον κοσμήτωρα της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής, καθηγητή Αντώνη Έλληνα, να αναγνώσει το ψήφισμα για την αναγόρευση.
Ψήφισμα. Μετά από ομόφωνη εισήγηση του Συμβουλίου της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής, απόφαση της Συγκλήτου και επικύρωση του Συμβουλίου του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου, επειδή η Terrie E. Moffitt, με την πρωτοποριακή, πολυσχηδή και διεθνώς αναγνωρισμένη συμβολή της στην επιστήμη της ψυχολογίας και ιδιαιτέρως στη μελέτη της ανθρώπινης ανάπτυξης, της ψυχοπαθολογίας και της αντικοινωνικής συμπεριφοράς, διαμόρφωσε καθοριστικά την κατανόηση της εκδήλωσης και ανάπτυξης συμπεριφορικών προβλημάτων κατά την παιδική, εφηβική, ενήλικη και υπηρήλικη ζωή. Με το εμβληματικό της έργο επέτρεψε τη βαθύτερη κατανόηση των αναπτυξιακών διαδρομών της αντικοινωνικής συμπεριφοράς, αξιοποιώντας δεδομένα από μακρόχρονες διαχρονικές μελέτες, γεφύρωσε το επιστημονικό χάσμα μεταξύ των επιστημονικών πεδίων της ψυχολογίας, της γενετικής, της νευροεπιστήμης και κοινωνικών επιστημών, όπως η εγκληματολογία, και ανέδειξε ένα ολοκληρωμένο πλαίσιο κατανόησης των ατομικών διαφορών και των προστατευτικών ή επιβαρυντικών παραγόντων, η καθολική συμβολή της στην ανάπτυξη μεθοδολογικών εργαλείων, η επιδραστικότητα της στη δημόσια ζωή και πολιτική και η ουσιαστική της συνεισφορά στη βελτίωση της ποιότητας ζωής ευάλωτων πληθυσμών καθιστούν το έργο της θεμελιώδες για την επιστήμη, τον άνθρωπο και την κοινωνία. Η Σχολή Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής, η Σύγκλιτος και το Συμβούλιο του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου αποφάσισαν ομόθυμα να της απονείμουν την ύψιστη τιμή που έχουν τη δικαιοδοσία να απονέμουν, να την αναγορεύσουν επίτιμη διδάκτορα της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής και να αναγράψουν το ψήφισμα αυτό σε περγαμηνή για να το αναγνώσει ο κοσμήτωρας και να της το επιδώσει ο πρίτανης την ημέρα της τελετής για την αναγόρευσή της. Στην πόλη της Λευκωσίας, την 25η Μαΐου του έτους 2026.
Καλώ τον κοσμήτωρα της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής να προσκομίσει την δίβαινο του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου για την περιέντηση της τιμωμένης. Καλώ ταυτόχρονα την καθηγήτρια Terrie Moffitt να προσέλθει για την αναγόρευσή της σε επίτιμη διδάκτορα της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής. Αναγόρευση. Επειδή η Σύγκλιτος του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου, το Συμβούλιο της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής έκρινε την καθηγήτρια Terrie Moffitt άξια να αναγορευτεί επίτιμη διδάκτορα της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου και το Συμβούλιο του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου επικύρωσε ομοφόνος την απόφαση, εγώ, ο Τάσος Χριστοφίδης, καθηγητής μαθηματικών και στατιστικής και πρίτανης του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου, την Terrie Moffitt αναγορεύω δημοσία, επίτιμη διδάκτορα της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου και της απονέμω όλες τις προνομίες που απορρέουν από το πανεπιστημιακό αυτό αξίωμα. Καλώ στο βήμα την Terrie Moffitt, Επίτιμη Διδάκτορα της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής του Πανεπιστημίου Κύπρου για την αντιφώνησή της. Please. If you don't, you can take it over and take it later. Okay? That's good. That's okay.
Here's someone's glasses. Thank you. Thank you so much for this. It means so much to me. Sorry, I weep easily at emotional moments. And thank you for the introduction, Professor Fanti and Professor Antonis. Thank you very much. This is a great honor for me. We live in a time today when many things in the world are going wrong this year. It's been a difficult year, a lot of things going wrong. But my week here in Cyprus has impressed me that things are going so right in Cyprus. I have been to, in the short visit, I've been to visit the antiquities at Neopaphos. I've been up to the mountains to see the Troros mountains, to see the Venetian bridges, to see the Byzantine churches. And what I see is the infrastructure, the museums, the pride that people here are taking in everything in Cyprus is working so right. I've had such a great week, and I thank you for that, as well as for this beautiful degree. Thank you. So now I should give you my lecture that I was invited to give. What I'd like to do is use this, right? Okay. Use this 20 minutes to tell you a story about my research team's work developing a measure of a human's pace of aging for use in prevention research. Let me just get my notes ready. Okay. Right. Our work in aging started here. If you look from the left to the right, can you all see? Should I? Okay. Look from the left to the right. From young to old, you can see the well-known accumulation of chronic diseases across the lifespan, accelerating in later life. So if the aim of prevention is to prevent the onset of these diseases, then the blue arrow shows a good intervention point has got to be during the 3rd to the 5th decades of life. This prevention concept is often referred to as the geroscience agenda. The idea is that advanced aging is a cause of almost all diseases. So if you can slow aging, you can prevent them all with one silver bullet. These silver bullets are already available for yeast and worms and flies and mice, and there's some very promising treatments to slow human aging as well. The goal of our work is to measure and study aging in those 3rd to 5th decades of life. And I wanted to do this because when we started out this work, almost all aging research had been done with older adults, people who are over 65, and now I count myself in them. But we know that exposures that cause age-related diseases accumulate, starting from early life. We know that changes to physiology occur many years before disease diagnosis. We know that organ damage is difficult to reverse fully once it is established. And this all means that preventive interventions must begin by midlife if we aim to slow aging and extend our health span. That is, our years that are lived in good health. So we need more research to understand processes of aging in young adults. If people intend to intervene in aging processes before midlife, it's important to first understand them. But a big question for us was, how can we measure how fast a young person has been aging? So here's an outline so you can follow along and see how the talk is progressing. And next, I will tell you how our research works. Our team has been tracking the health and development of the Dunedin study, a study of a birth cohort of over 1,000 individuals born in 1972. Now, this slide shows you composite faces from digital photos of 10 female and 10 male Dunedin cohort members. When we first proposed to study aging in young adults who were in their 30s and 40s at that time, peer reviewers scoffed at our grant applications. Maybe this has happened to some of you where peer reviewers did not like your paper or your grant application. They complained there could not be any variation on measurements relevant to the study of aging in people who were that young. Now, these photos were taken on their 45th birthdays, and they do look pretty young. Now, however, these composites are 45-year-olds in the study too. They comprise the 10 fastest aging women and men in the birth cohort. Now, all the people in this birth cohort that we study were born in the same year. There's obviously enormous variation in the Dunedin study participants' aging many years before they would be considered to be older adults. So we set out to quantify this biological variation in order to study it. So next, how did we measure the pace of aging in this longitudinal study? Now, I thought our team should pay attention to what a group of researchers who called themselves geroscientists were saying about their operational definition of aging. They defined aging as the gradual, progressive, correlated deterioration of physiological integrity across multiple bodily systems. That's quite a lot. It's the decline across our organ systems that is synchronized and happening simultaneously. Now, in the Dunedin study, we had been tracking these 19 biomarkers that you see here since the 1,000 study members were in their 20s. We measured gum disease, C-reactive protein for inflammation, cardiovascular fitness, creatinine, blood pressure, and many others. Now, our first check was, would the cohort of people we studied show evidence of deterioration on the biomarkers across the middle decades of life? I'm going to show you 4 examples. This is the mean blood pressure of the cohort members, and it rose steadily from age 26 to 32 to 38 to 45. And here is the HbA1c for diabetes. It worsened steadily from age 26 to 32 to 38 to 45. And the cohort's mean lung function declined from age 26 to 45. And we see the same pattern of decline for VO2 max, which is a measure of cardiovascular fitness on an exercise bike. Now, I'm not going to show you all 19 biomarkers one by one, but this slide depicts just an eyeball look at the data for the 19 biomarkers. Virtually all of them did show gradual, progressive, coordinated worsening of physiological integrity across multiple bodily systems, just as predicted. But some cohort members are declining fast, and others are hardly declining at all. They're staying young. And we wanted to capture these differences between individuals. So we calculated 19 change curves, one for each of the repeated biomarker measures. And then we combined these curves to model what we called the pace of aging. Each individual in the Dunedin cohort got a single score that represents their personal slope on the, across all of the 19 biomarkers. Now, the red dotted line shows you a person who's aging very fast. The blue dotted line shows you a person who is aging slow. So this captures that concept, that theoretical concept of synchronized longitudinal change. Now, this histogram shows you the resulting distribution of the pace of aging scores in the Dunedin cohort. Most people age 1 biological year per chronological year. That's normal and healthy. If you look on the left in blue, you see that there are a few cohort members who show almost no biological aging between age 26 and 45. They've been remaining young. And if you look on the right in red, you see some cohort members aged faster, at the extreme almost 2 years per chronological year. So what did we learn from this part of the research? We learned that the pace of biological aging can be measured in young adults, and the pace of aging scores validly predicted cohort members' outcomes on all our measures of their physical limitations, their sensory problems, their cognitive decline, and even their facial aging and their brain aging. But we needed an exportable version of the pace of aging that other researchers could use. We were really inordinately proud of our great measure that we had built, but other research teams did not have 20 years of biomarker data in midlife. And this meant that nobody could try to replicate our work, and nobody could build on it. So this was quite frightening to my research team, so we got super motivated to develop an exportable measure that we could share with other researchers. So next I'll tell you about converting the pace of aging to a blood test. There's a particularly urgent need for an exportable measure of the pace of aging is for testing the efficacy of anti-aging therapeutics. They're also called geroprotective therapeutics. There are government-funded clinical trials, many compounds in the pipeline, and lots of biotech companies who are working on therapies to fight aging. You can check out the fightaging.org website for more information on this longevity industry, which is by now valued at $2 trillion. It's really big. So here's an example of a rather dubious product. It's from the United Airlines in-flight magazine, a daily supplement that will supposedly grow your telomeres if you eat it. So you will notice that these days, products marketed as reversing aging are all over the place now. In case you haven't noticed, we baby boomers do not want to get old, and we do not want to die, and we are a huge and motivated market, and we've got money to spend. So this creates the longevity industry. And we have posh clinics and spas like this longevity suite are popping up all over. They're offering us expensive treatments like the plasma exchange, hyperbaric oxygen chambers, things like that. We even have one here in Limassol. I think there's actually more than one. So much of this longevity industry is bogus snake oil. Do you have this phrase in Greek, snake oil? Okay, something false. But an equal amount is real and will really work. So how do we tell the difference? So something important and fundamental is missing from the science. The longevity industry needs outcome measures. This need is described in this recent Nature Biotech article. So how can we tell when any of the rejuvenation interventions are working to actually slow aging? Now, traditional drug trials for diseases use diagnosis and death as the endpoint outcomes to convince the US FDA and the European Medicines Agency that a drug really works. But randomized clinical trials of geroprotective drugs administered as prevention to slow aging in the 3rd to 5th decade of life can't use disease or death as their outcome because, if you remember, the therapy is supposed to be administered in midlife, and death and disease are many years in the trial participants' future, far too long for clinical trial researchers to wait for their answers. So the randomized clinical trials need a way to measure a younger adult's pace of aging. We need cheap, easy, repeatable measures of the pace of biological aging to use as randomized trial outcomes. And a good measure has got to be responsive to change in trials of anti-aging therapies. So we translated our longitudinal pace of aging measure into a blood test by deriving DNA methylation signature of the pace of aging. The measure is called Dunedin pace, for pace of aging computed in the epigenome. I'm going to skip all the technical details you'll be relieved to hear, but we used epigenetic data, and these are the DNA methylation marks on top of the genome. So although your DNA does not change after you're conceived, these epigenetic marks can change, and they do change with increasing age as you grow older. Here are my students who are trying out the test. It requires just a simple dried blood spot. It's that easy. So you will know that there are many aging clocks out there now, and you may be wondering how Dunedin pace is different from the other clocks. I could go on and on. Dunedin pace has several design advantages, but I want to just focus on the one at the top that's in the yellow box. The pace of aging was derived in a cohort of people who were all born in the same year. This means it has no noise from historical differences in exposure to factors that might alter your epigenome in different generations. And participants from different generations is what has been used to develop all of the other aging clocks. So let me illustrate this for you, because this feature is unique to Dunedin pace. Now, here you see 3 generations of participants in a typical data set that would be used to develop an aging clock. I've listed factors that can alter the epigenome that are typical of each generation. For example, the eldest generation you see on the left was typically exposed to 40 years of tobacco smoke, did not have access to antibiotics or anti-inflammatory medications, and suffered extensive dental infections. The middle-aged generation typically experienced 7 years of tobacco smoke exposure, had elevated toxic levels from leaded gasoline, had fluoride in their drinking water, and chronic herpes infections. The youngest generation typically never smoked, but they absorbed agricultural chemicals from foods, and they ate ultra-processed foods, and they are growing up on microplastics. And many of them today take antidepressant medications and anti-anxiety medications. So it's a reasonable hypothesis that these different exposures in different generations may contribute noise to the clocks that have been developed in samples of different ages, which is all of the other clocks. So that's how it's different. Dunedin pace is like a car's speedometer. It's trained on longitudinal change data, so it measures how fast your body's organ systems are declining. We designed it hoping it would be responsive to interventions and treatments. And now that we had an exportable blood test measure, our top priority was to validate that the measure worked outside the Dunedin study in other research cohorts to test if it's going to be useful to the wider field. By now, we've exported this speedometer measure to more than 65 large epidemiological cohorts in 18 countries. Clinical researchers in medical settings have begun to use Dunedin pace as well, and even some clinical trials. More than 500 publications in total have appeared since the algorithm was first made available online in 2020. Now, Dunedin pace was developed in white New Zealanders, so everybody wondered if it would work in other ethnic ancestry groups, and the answer is yes. It works. Publications of positive findings have appeared in all of these ethnic groups. And Dunedin pace was developed in a midlife cohort, followed only up to age 45, so everyone wondered if it would work in older adults. The answer there is yes also. Positive findings have been published from more than 20 cohorts of older adults over age 70, and they're listed here with their countries. Now, a key aspect of validation of an aging clock is whether a measure is able to predict the endpoint outcome of early mortality. If you're aging faster, you should die younger. There are more than 30 studies of mortality now, and these are examples of publications that come from cohorts of these older adults. People with a faster pace of aging have an earlier death in all of the studies. And here's an example of our validation research. We tracked electronic medical records for American military veterans who were age 37 and still healthy at the baseline. After 10 years, the veterans who were aging fastest at the baseline, in dark red, developed more chronic diseases than the slowest aging veterans who are shown in blue. And one of these diseases is Alzheimer's dementia. This slide shows data from the Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative. Dunedin PACE, which is over on the right, is able to predict Alzheimer's disease. The blue bar is patients with normal cognition, the orange is patients with mild cognitive impairment, and the gray is the patients who had dementia. The dementia patients were aging the fastest. On the left are the results from the other leading aging clocks. The effect sizes on this figure are modest, but they're the best we have so far. So now that a good validation data are in place to show that the pace of aging predicts clinical endpoint outcomes like death and Alzheimer's, we could look at tests of what predicts a faster pace of aging. I'm just going to show you a few of the publications. There's a full reference list on the website. So early life adversity is an important influence on aging. It has predicted faster pace of aging in more than 40 studies. Adversities are studied in childhood include famine, infections, and other adverse childhood experiences, some psychosocial experiences. Here are data from the Dutch Hunger Winter Study. It found that faster pace of aging in adults who had decades ago been unborn fetuses during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands. This is a small effect, but it spans 70 years of life. Nutrition researchers have asked, do people who eat a better diet have a slower pace of aging? There are not a lot of studies yet, but so far they tend to agree. If you eat better, you age slower, and the strongest effects are for the Mediterranean diet, of course, which we eat here in Cyprus, and I've been enjoying very much. So psychologists are also asking if social connections affect the pace of aging. Many reports have appeared showing that factors such as loneliness, social isolation, volunteering, and having a purpose in life relate to the pace of aging. And one of these psychosocial factors is social support. This slide shows in the American Health and Retirement Study that a Dunedin pace of aging measure over on the right is slower in older people who have good support from their spouse, their children, their family, and their friends. Now, a particularly interesting report came out recently on climate. The authors ascertained each participant's exposure to heat based on addresses where they had lived for the last 6 years and geographic linkage to weather records for their locations. The more time a person had spent living in extreme hot weather, which is the dark red on the map, the faster their pace of aging. Now, since 2023, the field has started to use experimental designs to test if epigenetic clocks are responsive to interventions. 2 of the trials have been fully controlled randomized trials, and in both, Dunedin pace was the only clock that was slowed by the treatment. This shows one of them. It's called the calorie trial. The blue line shows that the control group kept on getting older during the year of the trial, but the green line shows that the group who restricted their calories to 1,800 calories per day slowed their aging. The benefits were modest, but they held up for almost a year. So this was a small clinical trial with a small effect, but it attracted a lot of interest. This is the other fully controlled and randomized trial. The Swiss Global Healthspan Consortium reported a trial called Do Health. In it, Dunedin pace was slowed by omega-3. Now, to me, one of the most exciting clinical trials will be the test of the GLP-1 receptor agonist weight loss drugs like Ozempic to see if they can slow the aging clocks. These drugs seem like they might be the silver bullet, that the geroscience world has been hoping for. Evidence is accumulating that these drugs may be able to prevent disease conditions in the many different organ systems that are shown on this slide. And if you recall, this was the very essence of the geroscience hypothesis, preventing many different diseases by slowing aging. There are small trials in samples of patients that have been done, and the pace of aging slowed when they were treated with drugs, but we're looking for a large trial of the GLP-1 drugs and aging. So will we humans ever achieve immortality through the efforts of geroscience and the longevity industry? Humans have been hoping for this since at least 2000 BC. Here is Gilgamesh, the Babylonian king who was the hero of one of humanity's oldest epic poems. Gilgamesh did not want to die, and he searched far and wide for an antidote to reverse aging. He was like today's baby boomers in that way. Now, although Gilgamesh failed to win immortality, in the epic poem he said the quest itself gave his life meaning. I think that's about where my research team is with this research. We don't know if anyone will ever be able to reverse aging, but we are finding the research to measure aging really interesting and meaningful. Meanwhile, our trainees are achieving immortality the old-fashioned way by having children. So these are some of the ones born in our lab in the recent years. So I want to end by thanking my team at Duke University and the team who operate the Dunedin study at the University of Otago in New Zealand. And thank you all for your generous attention.
Στο σημείο αυτό, κηρύσω τη λήξη της ειδικής δημόσιας συνεδρίας της Σχολής Κοινωνικών Επιστημών και Επιστημών της Αγωγής και καλώ το ακαδημαϊκό προσωπικό της σχολής να συγχαρεί το νέο μέλος. Παρακαλώ τις παρευρισκόμενες και τους παρευρισκόμενους, όπως παραμείνουν στις θέσεις τους, μέχρι να αποχωρήσει η πομπή των ακαδημαϊκών που έλαβαν μέρος στην τελετή αναγόρευσης.